Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about finding co-founders. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, why is it so hard to find a tech co-founder who can write all my code for my startup? Because usually software developers are like most people, they prefer to work for somebody who is going to pay them well. And most people don't want to start their own company, they want to work for somebody else. And there are a lot of thoughts on that. My personal way of expressing it is sort of like, do you want to be a farmer or do you want to be a hunter? And usually the risks are lower, and like the routines and stability of farming is higher than it is being a hunter, because there's more risk and unknowns and so forth involved for many. I hope that makes sense for you. It's the same thing with owning a business versus just working for somebody else. There's always a level of risk, but the amount of the risk is usually a little bit different, and the amount of hours that you have to put in as a small business owner is usually fairly high in comparison to like the stress and like the same sort of considerations you have to have as an employee. That's not always true, of course, but it's a very popular sentiment among people. Hence why, well, we have more workers than we have business owners usually. But the reason why you're finding it hard is because it's very difficult to find any software developers whatsoever. So as you can imagine, if it's hard to find someone to work for you, finding someone who's going to found your company with you is like, it's almost hilarious. I used to work on a few of these sorts of projects with a few guys that I knew, and at the time I was really only, like, for me it was more something I did to in the early days, because they had no chance whatsoever to find any other software developers. I think that they actually finally gave up. They found, like, I worked with them for a few years as a junior software developer just because I thought that it was going to be good practice. And the one thing I told them was that if we're going to make this a success, you're going to have to prove to me that you know how to get this thing off the ground, which is the classic thing, because a business person is usually useless in the early days of a tech startup, because they have no product to sell. They have nothing. And so the way that I measured how serious they were was actually by stating to them, all right, find another developer, any developer, doesn't matter who it is, just find one more person. In 4 years they couldn't make that happen. The reason being that most software developers are not interested in your idea, and your idea might be good, it might not, it's hard to tell. Without any product to sell, it's really only you're sort of asking another person to literally sit and do many hours of work and hope that someone's going to pay you for it. It's very risky. It's a lot of upfront work, and very few people are willing to make that sort of investment, especially when they might have to quit their current job, or they might have to like work on the side, or so forth and so forth. It's, I mean, as you can imagine, some software developers make a fairly good living in many parts of the world, so it's not really weird, in my opinion, that you're not going to find someone who does this for free. It's sort of like anybody. Like if you ask them to do a bunch of work for you without any return on investment, or potentially no return on investment, very few people are willing to make that bet. Some people are dreamers, and they really do believe, and they do like invest and so forth. And if you want to have a better chance at doing this, it's really important that you ask the non-technical co-founder, because this way that these startups are usually made is, well, usually the way it goes is that you have a person who is an entrepreneur or a domain expert or something, like a non-technical person who has an idea, and then you find a technical person to make that thing into reality, which is just basically a programmer most of the time. Not always, but in many cases, or an investor, so you can actually pay a programmer to build the prototype or something like that, because that's something you can consider as well. You don't have to find a technical co-founder in the very, very early days. If you have some money, you can hire consultants, etc., etc. There are ways to get around having a programmer, but having a technical co-founder is a very good start. And I know for a lot of business people, this is like the trend right now, how you set up like a good technical IT startup, and it's of course not in any way based on the successes of IT companies today. It's a trend, just as most things are. And so the way to do this is to be prepared, to really understand that if you're going to make a sales pitch to a technical person, just as if it was a customer, a technical person is going to not give you money for this, but is going to give you his or her time. And in the early days, this is sort of the IT person is your product, and that's something that not a lot of business people understand. The coder, you think that the digital thing, like the system, is your product, it's your resource, right? No, the coder is your resource. The dynamics that you can think of is that you are in essence nothing more than a manager for the talent, because the code does not exist without the talent. It's like a musician or like an athlete or something like that. It's or like a sports team or something like that. The team, the people who are working on the technical solution, they are the talent that is going to make everything for you. They are the people who are going to make the money, etc., etc. So you have to find good people, but you also have to convince them that they should put their effort into building something for you so that you can go and sell it or do the other thing. And it usually helps a lot. These are a few tips that you can use to already have a very worked out business plan where you have a clear customer. Something like the best thing is if you can actually make it almost a done deal, where you have some bigger customers or like corporate customers or something like that, where they basically state that if you can make this thing, we're going to pay you this amount and this amount, etc., etc. Get the designing and planning and the business plan and all that stuff to a point where you can basically say with almost certainty that this is a done deal. The safer or lower risk you can make something, the better. And it also helps you sort of prove your value in the equation, because as you can imagine, why would a technical person get into a partnership with someone who is pretty much useless? I've been in those situations, guys, where unless you know how to code in the early days, you are pointless in a tech startup, practically. But you can make a difference, and you sort of have to prove that you can actually pull your own weight, and that is usually easy in the later stages of a startup, or like when you actually have a system and like all of these sorts of things. It's never going to be completely like super easy, but it is easier. So make sure that you're prepared and think of that software developer, the co-founder that you're going to find, as just another customer. And if you know the law of averages, you know that you're going to have to go through quite a lot of people until you find someone who's even going to hear you out. And when they hear you out, you better have a damn good sales pitch prepared and a business plan that this person can sort of buy into with a vision and all that good stuff. So what I want you to take away from this is that the reason why it's hard to find a tech co-founder is because it's hard to find any software developer. Even if you pay them a lot of money, usually, it's going to be hard for you to find someone, because most of them are already employed. There's a deficit that is so enormous that it's hard to describe it. But I think the last time I checked, the unemployment rate of software developers is like 1% or something like that, 1.5 or 0.5, something ridiculous like that. That is global. So most software developers are already employed. They're already working somewhere else. And so if you're going to get them to leave their safe, cushy, usually the sort of job with a decent salary to go and work on your startup or something like that, you're going to have to come prepared and treat them as a customer. Go through a lot of different recruitment channels, talk to people, and then have a good sales pitch. Because if you can't sell it to the technical person, then they're not going to build it, and therefore you're not even going to get a chance to sell it to the customer. It is a very good idea for you to make sure that you are well prepared, and ideally you should already have a customer for the system, because you can design the concept, the vision, everything. You can create all of this stuff to the point where you really just need someone to write the code. And if you get it to that point, you might even be able to get some initial funding from one of your customers, or if depending on how you want to structure it, and hire or pay the co-founder or like the engineer or something to start off with, and go about it a different way. Because guys, you don't have to find someone who's willing to do the coding for free if you have a really solid idea necessarily. There are ways to find someone who can write the software, and you don't necessarily need to have that same person follow you along for the journey of creating your own startup. It's a good idea. It's of course great if you can, but sometimes it might be that you're going to have to raise some funds in some other fashion and just hire a temporary consultant to help you get the thing off the ground. Have a great day.